We'll start with Isaiah chapter 3, verse 9. It says, "The shew of their countenance doth witness against them, and they declare their sin as Sodom. They hide it not. Woe unto their soul, for they have rewarded evil unto themselves." Now go down to verse 12 in the same chapter. In Isaiah 3, verse 12 says, "As for my people, children are their oppressors, and women rule over them. O my people, they which lead thee cause thee to err, and destroy the way of thy paths." When it comes to gender issues and LGBT plus issues, it has become popular to sacrifice truth on the altar of emotions and delusions, and all too often feelings and wishful thinking are given the priority over reality. Let's start looking at these issues realistically. The movement to confuse the sexes and promote LGBT plus is not new and has always depended on lies, deception, delusions, and misleading propaganda. Consider a few examples. Example number 1. Homosexuals do not need same-sex marriage legalized for homosexuals to make commitments. The actual purpose of legalization of same-sex marriage is legislated acceptance of homosexual behavior. Example number 2. Before the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, there was a ban on homosexuality in the military throughout American history because homosexuality has such a devastating impact on discipline, morale, cohesion, and the overall effectiveness of military units in combat. While soldiers are not expected to be perfect, various rules are necessary to enable the armed forces to be effective. For example, recreational drugs and drinking while on duty are prohibited because this hinders the effectiveness of military units. The primary purpose of the armed forces is to prepare for and prevail in combat when the need arises, and this makes rules and restrictions on personal behavior necessary to enable the armed forces to be effective. Even though there is no constitutional right to serve in the armed forces, the media and social engineers have made this appear to be a civil rights issue by focusing attention on everything but crucial issues. I encourage you to research this further. Example number 3. When the U.S. government started enlisting women in the armed forces in 1942, women in the armed forces did jobs previously handled by civilian employees of the armed forces, and the main difference was the uniforms. The decision to put women in the armed forces was not based on need, as there was no need to put women in the armed forces. Along with physical limitations and hygiene issues, the enormous cost of accommodating women makes it impractical to put women in the armed forces. Also, sexual tensions and sexual relationships between members of the same military organization have a devastating impact on discipline, morale, cohesion, and the overall effectiveness of military units in combat. And with both genders in the armed forces, the inevitable conditions and situations involved in military life and duties make this situation inevitable. Even today, the truth about women in the military is kept under wraps because disclosure of the whole truth could incite public outcry against putting women in the armed forces. Even though there is no constitutional right to serve in the military, feminists and the media have made this appear to be a civil rights issue by diverting attention away from crucial issues. I strongly encourage further research on this. Example number 4. For decades, feminists have vilified feminine women and masculine men, and celebrated masculine women and effeminate men, and, along with other social engineers, have demanded that society and government ignore reality, support delusions, and enforce egalitarian socialism. Example number 5. The media promotes distorted and evil values and philosophies through talk shows and pop psychology. Example number 6. For decades, movies and TV shows have often portrayed different versions of the story of a husband that is such an inept boob that the wife is compelled to assume leadership in the home, and it is not unusual for the entertainment media to portray the children in a family as wiser than the husband and father. Continually feeding their minds with this junk and thus molding their hearts has led to many wives trying to train their husbands while submitting to their children and believing this is right. Example number 7. For decades, movies and TV shows and romance novels have often portrayed different versions of the story of a man of bad character or extreme immaturity that just needs the love of a good woman to reform him, convert him, or make him whole. Continually feeding their minds with this junk and thus molding their hearts has led to many women preferring wicked or immature men that they believe they can change. Example number 8. For decades, movies and TV shows have often portrayed different versions of the story of a wife that divorces her husband because everything is not going exactly her way, or because she found another lover, and goes on to have a great career and a fulfilling life or a better marriage. Incidentally, reality is usually the opposite of this. Example number 9. For decades, movies and TV shows have often portrayed different versions of the story of a woman of bad character or extreme immaturity that is either an ideal wife or a good example for adult women to emulate, or both. Example number 10. The theory that egalitarian partnership is the key to domestic tranquility and marital happiness has been a recurring theme in movies and TV shows for a long time. Example number 11. Encouraging women to transfer dependence from husband or father to the government encouraged men to neglect or forsake their duties and responsibilities as men, and encouraged grown people of both sexes to act like spoiled teenagers, dismissing reality in pursuit of utopian dreams. Example number 12. The theory that illicit cohabitation is a good recipe for domestic tranquility and marital happiness has been a recurring theme in movies and TV shows for a long time, even though couples that live together before marriage usually end up divorced, and a woman shacking up with a man without wedlock is far more likely to suffer domestic abuse than a married woman. Example number 13. For decades, feminists and the liberal media have encouraged women to trade their complementary role for equality and mimic the sexual aggressiveness of men and be immodest, immoral, and promiscuous. In this way, women relinquished their natural power as the civilizing and stabilizing influence over men that God designed them to be. Example number 14. Feminists and the liberal media continually portray male conveniences as advantages for women. Artificial insemination reduces women to the status of incubators and eliminates paternal responsibility. Birth control diminishes the necessity of commitment and stability in a relationship. Abortion eliminates the responsibility of fatherhood while leaving women physically and emotionally scarred, while respect for life encourages commitment. Feminism makes abortion, birth control, and other male conveniences important to discourage female inhibition and encourage licentiousness, and thus supposedly empower women, but in reality merely fulfill male fantasies and accommodate the baser instincts of men, while biblical patriarchy condemns such practices which tend to degrade women and reduce or eliminate male responsibilities. Example number 15. What is the hard evidence that male and female think and feel the same about sex? The myth about male and female sexual equality has made women more vulnerable to exploitation, abuse, and neglect. Example number 16. What is the hard evidence that differences between the sexes are only physical? Example number 17. Movies and TV shows in which the only white male that appears to be normal or a gentleman is homosexual, or in which same-sex couples appear to have better relationships, help to convince many that homosexuality and same-sex marriage are acceptable. Example number 18. We do not see or hear much, if anything, about the homophobia, violence, domestic abuse, and infidelity within the homosexual community, even though a homosexual is more likely to be murdered or assaulted by a homosexual than by a heterosexual. A homosexual is more likely to suffer domestic abuse than a heterosexual, and people in same-sex marriages are more likely to commit adultery than married heterosexuals. Example number 19. What is the hard evidence that there is such a thing as homosexual orientation? Example number 20. What is the hard evidence that homosexuality is an immutable characteristic? Example number 21. What is the hard evidence that homosexuals are born that way? Example number 22. What is the hard evidence that homosexuality is an inherited trait and not learned behavior and distorted love needs? Example number 23. What is the hard evidence that some biological males are females and some biological females are males? More examples could be given, but these should suffice for now. It is important that Christians take a stand on these issues. Standing for the truth in all areas and taking positions that clarify Bible truths in a compelling manner is essential to integrity and Christian witness and Christian influence. Of course, if you are not a Christian, you need to be saved. Salvation is a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. The gospel is the death, burial, and literal resurrection of Jesus Christ, through which lost sinners are justified through faith in the person and work of Jesus Christ when they repent. You are not a sinner because you sin. You sin because you are a sinner. You cannot be saved through works or do anything to merit salvation. It is also important that you realize that saving faith is repentant faith. I urge you to pray and repent and believe in Jesus before it is eternally too late.